Karen's first scream didn't come from the HOA office. It came from her bathroom at 6 in the morning, loud enough to wake the whole street. By the time neighbors peeked out their curtains, she was standing in her driveway clutching clumps of her own blonde hair like a crime scene exhibit, pointing at me and shouting that I had sabotaged her beauty. Me. The guy who had spent weeks begging her not to set foot in my lake, the same lake plastered with giant yellow signs screaming, "Hazardous water, no swimming." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just another HOA dispute, this was war. Let me rewind. My name doesn't matter here because if you ask Karen, it's Bob. She insists on calling me that no matter how many times I correct her. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac. Decent houses, lawns trimmed to HOA standards, the kind of neighborhood where the biggest drama should be whose recycling bin rolled into whose driveway. But I happen to own land with a lake at the edge of it. Not a pretty lake, not one of those shimmering suburban water features. This thing is a leftover pit of chemical soup from an old factory site surrounded by fencing and bright warning signs. Ducks don't even land there. It smells faintly of metal and rot when the wind blows right. It's poison plain and simple, and that's exactly what drew Karen in. Karen Matthews' middle-aged bleach blonde curls, sprayed stiff always in big floppy hats and gaudy sunglasses. She's the HOA president, which in her mind makes her the queen of everything she sees. If you've never lived under an HOA, let me translate. She's the kind of person who'll send you violation letters if your trash can sits at the curb 5 minutes too long, but then turn around and declare herself above the rules when it suits her. And for whatever twisted reason, she decided my toxic lake was a community wellness lagoon. The first time I saw her waddle down in her robe dragging a pink flamingo float behind her, I thought it was a joke. She plopped herself in that muck like it was a resort spa wine box, perched on the shore Bluetooth speaker, blasting relaxation music. When I confronted her, "Karen, this is hazardous water. There are report signs," everything she just waved and said, "You don't own nature, Bob. You'll thank me when this raises property values." I nearly lost it. Who in their right mind thinks radioactive algae and chemical sludge adds curb appeal? But Karen had that glazed confidence only people drunk on their own power have. She clutched her floaty like it was a throne and smirked while the fumes lapped around her. I filed complaints. I called City Hall. I even printed copies of the environmental reports and handed them to her. She laughed, called them government scare tactics, and kept scheduling her little spa sessions. Before I knew it, she wasn't alone. Other HOA board members started joining in. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, lake therapy days. My backyard turned into some deranged beach party. Neighbors lugged coolers and towels into my yard like I was their unpaid lifeguard. Karen appointed herself lake director. She even had a whistle. I stood there with my arms crossed, asking if they'd collectively lost their minds. "You're going to regret this," I told them. Karen dipped her toes into the green water and said, "The only regret here is your lack of community spirit, Bob." The first week it looked like harmless stupidity. By the second I noticed coughing fits, blotchy rashes on arms and legs. Karen brushed it off. Detox, she called it. When one guy broke out in red welts, she suggested he drink more of the water to balance it out. I nearly choked. And here's the part where I started doubting myself. Every time I complained, every time I begged them to stop, I got eye rolls and snickers. Neighbors muttered that I was dramatic antisocial, not a team player. The HOA board whispered behind my back at meetings. And for one long, miserable night I wondered, maybe I am the crazy one. Maybe I should just let it go. If they want to ruin their skin and lungs in a toxic swamp, what business is it of mine? I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining selling the house, leaving the neighborhood, starting over somewhere without Karens and HOAs. But then I heard it. Karen's scream. Not from the clubhouse. From her house. 6 a.m. sharp. I dragged myself to the window, and there she was, stumbling into the street with clumps of her hair in her fists, shrieking like she'd been scalped. Neighbors poured out in robes and slippers staring. She spun around wild-eyed and pointed at me. "He poisoned the water. He's trying to destroy me." I almost laughed out loud. Her wig was sliding off bald patches, glinting in the dawn light, and still she had the audacity to accuse me. That morning, half the HOA showed up on my porch, scratching their own rashes, coughing like chain smokers, but still backing Karen up. She shouted that I had dumped hair removal chemicals into the lake, that I was waging chemical warfare against the community. It only got more ridiculous. Karen staged a mock trial in the HOA clubhouse. She printed flyers with my face under the words, "Lake Villain." She strutted around in a crooked wig, pointing at me like some budget Judge Judy, and tried to convince the board that I'd turned the lake into a weapon. Half the room was busy scratching at their peeling arms, the other half trying not to laugh as her wig slipped backward. That's when my salvation walked through the door. The state environmental inspector. Clipboard lab coat stack of reports thicker than a phone book. He looked around, sniffed the chemical stink still clinging to Karen's robe, and sighed like he'd seen this circus too many times before. In calm, measured words, he explained the lake had been officially declared hazardous decades ago after industrial dumping. It was government-documented sludge toxic by nature, not by sabotage. Every warning sign had been ignored. Every trespass was their own choice. Karen's face turned crimson. She sputtered, tried to argue, but her wig tilted sideways and the room erupted. Someone snorted. Then someone else laughed. Within seconds, the whole board was howling. Phones came out, pictures snapped of Karen's half-bald head under fluorescent lights. The inspector coughed into his sleeve to hide a chuckle. I just sat there, arms folded, letting the truth do my work. Karen's humiliation spread faster than any rash. By nightfall, the neighborhood group chat was flooded with memes. Lake Witch Karen photoshopped seaweed hair captions about toxic spa treatments. Her attempt to sue me backfired immediately. Instead, the city slapped her with fines trespassing, ignoring safety postings leading others into danger. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves, claiming Karen had misled them. Classic rats off a sinking ship. Now every meeting she shows up in a stiff synthetic wig that shines like plastic. She tries to glare at me across the room, but it doesn't land. Whenever she opens her mouth about community wellness, someone coughs dramatically or whispers, "Careful, don't lose another patch," and the room breaks into laughter. I didn't have to poison her lake, didn't have to fight her in the mud. Karen drowned herself in her own arrogance, her own refusal to listen. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground, keep your receipts, and wait for the truth to surface. Never underestimate how fast pride can sink a tyrant.